Hello, everyone. Welcome to LitChats. My name is Amber Peterson, and I'm the Chief Program Officer for LitWorld. LitWorld, we're partners with amazing community-based organizations all around the world to strengthen kids and communities through the power of story. Today, we have a very special episode of LitChats as I get to sit down with my LitWorld colleague, Paige to talk about women, girls, and LitWorld's newest initiative, the Memory Keepers Project. Paige, welcome.
Thank you so much, Amber. It's so good to be here, and it's good to see everyone. My name's Paige. I'm our Chief of Staff here at LitWorld, and I've had the pleasure of working with Amber and our founding director, Pam Allen, for a number of years now, and I am so excited to talk about the Memory Keepers Project, especially in the context of the stories of women and girls.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is exciting because we have a lot of conversations, so it's nice to be able to record these conversations. Where I think we hit on some important topics, some really important things that we think a lot about at LitWorld as we design programs and as we think about our partnerships. And so I'm excited for us to have this conversation specifically about the Memory Keepers Project, which is our brand newest initiative. It's an opportunity for us to bring people together through intergenerational storytelling. Children and teens who are part of this program follow Memory Keeper Project lessons and guidance that we provide to interview elders in their communities for stories about their lives. And the goal of it all is to preserve stories creatively and humanely and use the information they get from these stories as North Stars to guide the participants into ethical, caring, and resilient lives of their own. We've been working on the Memory Keepers Project for quite some time at LitWorld. So maybe we can both talk a little bit about what it's been like to work on this project and what's really stood out to us about this initiative. So I'll let you go first, Paige. What has it been like for you?
I mean, it's been incredible working on the Memory Keepers Project. It's really exciting. I think that one thing that has struck me is when we talk to people kind of as we're talking to our partners and partners of all different kinds around the world in the United States, and we say, we're going to be doing this project. It's the Memory Keepers Project. It's about intergenerational storytelling. You see people's eyes light up. And I think that one of the things that's felt really impactful for me is seeing how many people of all kinds of backgrounds, ages, locations, feel this deep pull towards intergenerational storytelling. And it feels like there's a gap there that maybe wasn't being addressed. So when you bring up, hey, we're going to be collecting stories from elders and inviting young people to interview elders and memorialize these stories in thoughtful and beautiful ways, people's eyes just light up. And seeing that sort of hungering for this work and this work of literacy has been really powerful. How about you, Amber? What's kind of jumped out to you? What's important to you about this?
Yeah, I mean, I first I'll agree with you. I think it is so cool to see how resonant this project is with so many people. I think people immediately kind of get it. They don't have to be convinced that intergenerational storytelling is something that's useful and necessary. And I think people are really hungering for that type of engagement with people in their communities. I know for me, one of the things that's been the most exciting and rewarding is seeing how people have interpreted this kind of initiative in different parts of the world, and with all of our
Yes.
different communities that we work with, what that's looked like. And in some places, it's super simple. People are just like, oh, Memory Keepers Project, got you. We're going to sit down and bring some elders together. We're going to have these conversations. And the scaffolds exist in some form already in the spaces that they're working in. But then there are other partners where it's a little harder. And it's kind of just like, okay, well, what do you mean bring people in? That's not something that we normally do. And what type of questions? And how do we set the scene? And so figuring out how to craft a curriculum that meets people wherever they are, because I think that's kind of what we're always trying to do with our work. But I think it's been really interesting to figure out what that looks like.
Definitely. Like depending on the partner, this is, I think, one of the beauties of the LitWorld model is that it's not this top-down approach. It's this, we're walking alongside of you and we want to learn about what is the cultural and community context in which you are storytelling. And I know growing up, I grew up in the Northeast here in the US, and we didn't do a lot of intergenerational storytelling. It was kids at the kids' table, adults at the adults' table. We're not necessarily sharing tons of stories. And so I feel like when we started talking about this project, I had these beautiful memories of my grandparents and my older aunts and uncles and listening to them in these snippets. But it definitely felt like a skill that I needed to practice in terms of how to thoughtfully approach elders in our community with questions that were resonant and respectful and interesting, because I didn't have a lot of practice doing it. And I think that that just varies, globally, what the structures are in place for that.
Oh, 100%. I think as I think there's the part that we've been playing with around what it means to ask for those stories, but then also like what it means to actually listen to those stories and
Mm,
realizing I think a lot of us don't have a lot of practice on what it means to be good listeners. We talk
truly.
about listening a lot, but a lot of us are listening to speak, and so I think there's a part of that that comes into figuring out what we need to build around this initiative as well. Um, I know another part of this project that's been really exciting is thinking about like what do we do with the stories. And I think we've gone through a lot of kind of ideas, and we've collected stories in a lot of different ways. But one of the key pieces of this project has become the Memory Keepers quilt, which is
Yes.
kind of how we're starting to collect some of these different stories and ideas from all of the people who are participating. And so the Memory Keepers quilt is kind of artistic representation of the meanings of each of these stories. Each person's story becomes a square in this quilt that's created by communities, but then also from LitWorld as like kind of a global quilt where we're able to pull these stories from so many different places. So playing with that concept of the quilt has also been really exciting.
Exactly. And I love the quilt as well. And I mean, at LitWorld, obviously, we're always thinking about literacy, reading, writing, speaking, listening. And so traditions of oral storytelling, of writing stories down, of listening to other
Mhm.
folks' stories, reading their stories, this is all part of that really comprehensive view of what literacy means. And I think that the Memory Keeper's quilt is another form of literacy. It's creative literacy. It's thinking about how do I communicate the nuances and details and in-person power of a story in a way that translates and transmutes visually. Maybe I'm not there listening to this elder story, but when I view this element of the quilt or when I experience, the retelling of that story, I can get a sense of its power and it can resonate with me as an individual, whether I'm 1 mile away or 1,000 miles away, a year away or 100 years away. I want to be able to access that. And I think, Amber, you and the team have done such a beautiful job of making sure that the programming is structured in such a way that it's very invitational and that folks have agency over how they author their stories, how they tell the stories of others, their opportunities and ways to participate that are nuanced while still participating in this sort of global, answering the global question of what does intergenerational storytelling mean to me and mean to our community.
Yeah, I mean it's really been a learning experience, and having like making the request as open as possible for these whatever these representations look like, these quotes look like, have been really a fun way of kind of unlocking creativity and seeing how people interpret that. And I think it's across the board. So I'm excited for us to be able to share more of what that's looked like, how people have, you know, come up with this idea of a quilt, how they're representing a quilt, how they're representing these stories and the pieces of the stories that are the most meaningful, and that make it into kind of uh, that final display. That's really exciting. Um,
Absolutely.
you know, March, as we both know, is Women's History Month, and the Memory Keepers Project feels particularly resonant at this moment. I think so many of the elders who have participated in the project so far are women, and so many of the stories that we've collected and have shared have detailed their experiences and their struggles. And I think, this is important because so many times women's stories are left out of traditional history books and accounts of communities. So, why do you think it's so important to intentionally create spaces where women's voices and experiences are heard, documented, and celebrated?
That is such a great question. And I think that, I think to your point, it's this interesting thing when we look historically at storytelling from women's perspectives, where out of the history books and maybe kind of more grander memorialized forms of storytelling, sometimes women's voices are left out. And at the same time, historically, across cultures, women have been these really powerful beacons of oral storytelling in their families and communities and their, neighborhoods. And so I think that this project really gives us an opportunity to highlight those different forms of storytelling. And I think even when we think about the Memory Keepers quilt and thinking back to that, yes, the quilt is a metaphor, but it's also a very literal tradition. Whether our quilt is made of
Oh, yeah.
paper or cloth or imagery or sound, when I think about the Gee's Bend sort of quilt making traditions or quilt making traditions across the United States, so frequently these are women coming together to share stories of their own lives, to learn lessons from one another, to impart lessons on their siblings or children or extended family members. And so I think that I'm really excited that we're zooming in on women's stories, because I think it's often under celebrated and under recognized as the tool for generational change making that this form of storytelling really is. What do you think? Why are you? What is this Women's History Month and Memory Keepers project? How do they kind of intersect for you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly that this is an incredible moment to kind of highlight the fact that these women's stories, they might be left out of, like you said, some of those traditional accounts of history, but they are so intrinsic to under our personal understanding of
Yes.
history, and women are so often the ones who carry down those messages through oral storytelling, through art, through cooking, through so many of the ways that we connect to our histories and to our pasts. They do come from women, traditionally, and so I think it is exciting to be able to celebrate and highlight that, especially through quilt making. I think, like as you mentioned, there are so many different traditions around quilts, which is why it felt such a appropriate symbol for this project. Because I think there are versions of quilts in so many different cultures that we're able to tap into, and again, that are represented in the ways that people are interpreting this project and this kind of request for information. So
Mhm.
um, I love that. That's really
And
exciting.
I'll also add to that too. I think that there is something to be said about the fact that this project is a global project and we have partners all around the world
Yeah.
engaging in it. Is there's so much of a thread between women's storytelling, especially oral storytelling, and I think that there's so much that we can learn from women around the world that is resonant to our own lives, and having that form of connected storytelling feels so powerful in this moment and so inspiring and connected. And I learned so much about my own life as a woman when I view my story through the reflection of other women's stories, whether they be my direct neighbors or around the world. And so I'm really excited that this is not just one partner who's doing this one project. It's really a collection of our partners that are putting their own spin on the project. So I'm really excited to see what those kind of threads of continuity are across this, storytelling initiative.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Earlier we spoke a little bit about kind of that listening part of this work. And this project really does ask participants to slow down, to listen deeply, to honor someone else's life story. Um, why do you think those listening skills and that kind of empathy required for that work is so important for young people today?
That's such a good question. I mean, I like got chills honestly when you asked that, because I do think that I think that as you kind of mentioned earlier, so many of us listen waiting to speak. We're not really listening, might be hearing, but we're not listening and understanding. And I think that especially, in 2026, there are many ways of, I'm thinking about online communication. I love the internet. I love social media. I love being online, but I think that it can be very fracturing in terms
Mm.
of our attention, our ability to communicate with others, and can sometimes break down these traditional bonds of empathy. It's a lot easier to let that muscle atrophy where when you're communicating with like millions of people around the globe at any given moment than it is when you're sitting across from them and really absorbing their story. And so I think that teaching skills of empathy and patient listening and reflective listening in this slower moment is a really wonderful antidote to some of the, I would say, what can be more challenging elements of communication in the modern age. What do you think? Can you share your insights around that kind of powerful active listening?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think you're spot on in thinking about why it's so important in kind of today's world. And I think that when we are creating moments to slow down and make that listening um, uh, possible, it does tap into something that is very like we know how to do that actually. We
Yeah.
do that, and I think we've done that when we were really young. When we're listening to our parents, and then all of the rest of the noise of the world comes in. But there's something so special about those moments, and I think it's going back to kind of some of the different scaffolds that may exist already in our lives that we just don't even pay attention to.
Yes.
It's an opportunity for us to kind of just tap into that. I know a lot of the stories that we've collected or talked about collecting have been stories that have happened when we're cooking or when we're you know sitting around on the porch at the end of the day.
Mm,
These moments do exist, but we don't necessarily pay attention to them. And so I
y-
think partly it's figuring out how do we revalue those moments even with all of the rest of the noise that we're um you know bombarded with all the time.
I love that. I think that that's so beautiful, and it makes me think too. Like if you're walking somewhere and you like see a spider web and you can't really see it, it's like very thin. But then when like dewdrops start to like
Yeah.
collect on it,
Oh,
you can
beautiful.
really see those
So bad.
threads of connection. Yes, and it just when you were talking, it made me think about that. It's like this memory keeper's work, this intergenerational storytelling. That's like the dewdrops on these threads of connection that really bring us all together. And we want to be really intentional about cultivating those moments so that we can see the structures that we already have in place that might be invisible to us on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, 100%. I love that metaphor. It's beautiful. um One of the goals of the Memory Keepers project is to create this space for authentic, relationship driven storytelling in every community that we work in. This feels particularly important when it comes to hearing and preserving the stories of women and girls. If every community around the world had the chance to preserve and share the stories of women, what kind of impact do you think it could have on the way that we understand our history and our future?
Wow, that's a big question, and I love it. So, at LitWorld, we're frequently thinking about that kind of self-community world model. So, it immediately makes me think of that. It makes me think the impact of the self, where recognizing that we're not isolated or individuals are not isolated in their lives and in this moment of history, we're connected through these threads of stories to our past, present, and future. So, building confidence, building autonomy, building a sense of connection, decreasing loneliness. I think we also see increased bonds throughout our communities and hearing stories of our community members, recognizing that we have a lot more in common than we do, different from us. And I also think that there's something, looking at the long term, learning learning the sort of lessons from the past helps us be intentional about how we move forward. So
Mm.
when I carry the stories of my elders with me, I have all of their wisdom and guidance to help me make the next right move, make the next right decision. And I think that when we make decisions in isolation and outside of history, there's a lot more room for us to make missteps. And so I think that by creating this sort of cradle of storytelling, we are emboldened and empowered to make the best decisions that we can for ourselves, our community, and our world as we move forward.
Oh, I love that. That's so well put. So
What do
well.
you think? What are your kind of is your vision of impact right now with Memory Keepers?
I mean, I think for me, this goal of preserving and amplifying and what's the word I'm saying? Legitimizing the
Yes.
stories and these experiences of women is an equity issue at the end of the day.
Yes.
Women are contributing. Women are shaping and guiding and such an incredibly integral part of the communities that were around the world. And so I think being able to hold up a quilt or a story and say, see, here it is, it feels so
Yes.
incredibly important. And I think it's a literacy issue at the end of the day. How are we valuing these stories? How are we valuing the ways that women are sharing these stories? We know that women who are given that agency to tell their stories, um, to speak for themselves, to speak for their communities, the more engaged they are, the stronger, the more powerful whole societies are.
Yes.
So I think part of this goal of preserving these stories is making sure that the voices of every member of the community are being uplifted and are being celebrated.
That's so
So
beautiful. I couldn't agree more.
well, I know this has been fun. I
Yes,
feel like
it's been a blast.
this is part of a ongoing conversation we have here at LitWorld. Thank you so much for jumping on this lit chat with me today. It's always fun to talk to you.
Thank you so
If
much,
you are
Amber.
tuning in to this conversation, please head over to litworld.org to find out more information about the Memory Keepers Project. And if you're able, join us for the official global LitWorld's Memory Keepers Project launch on June 1st here in New York City. You can visit litworld.org/spring to dedicate a quilt square in honor of a loved one and buy your tickets. It should be a really, really, really fun event. Um, Even if you're not local, you can celebrate with us online. You can learn more about the project and how you can get involved by following us on social media. We're at LitWorld on Instagram and Facebook, and at LitWorld Says on X. Uh, Thank you so much
Thank
for being part of this conversation.
Thank you, Amber. This was great. I'm so excited. I want to invite all of our viewers and watchers right now to join us as memory keepers. Get out there and do some generational storytelling and share your stories with us.
Oh,
You, I'm
100%.
I'm so glad that we get to tell stories and learn from one another on a daily basis, Amber. So thank you so much.
Likewise, likewise. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.